right. Always seems to be a bit of a last minute rush, but we are back with the Wilfreds. And of course, everyone at this point knows that Harmon Wilfred is America's first refugee and that he and his wife have been suffering terribly through a multi-year separation. Carolyn, Harmon, how are you guys?
We're okay, and I'm going to remind you to lock the room as we continue speaking.
Ah, yes, of course. Now, unfortunately, we are having that persistent sound problem there, Carolyn. Let's hear you for a second.
Hello, hello.
Yeah, it's
Can you
pretty
hear
bad.
me?
It is pretty bad. We've been working through this in the lead up. I so hate to troubleshoot things while we are live here, but would you like?
You want to just go to mine?
Yeah, let's try that real quick, Harmon, if we can.
Okay.
Okay,
Leave
we're
this
going
one
on
here
mute
and
for a
go.
minute.
Leave this one and go to mine.
Yep, okay.
So we've been working with this Appear In software because it seems to give us better sound quality than Skype. Of course, we've got Harmon over there in New Zealand, and from time to time there are some technical difficulties. Let's see if we can make this work a bit better. For people that are joining us on this story for the first time, Harmon Wilfred was a CIA contractor who discovered that he was involved in some financial dealings that appeared to him to amount to a black ops bank. How is our audio now, Carolyn?
I think that's much better, and
It is.
Harmon,
Good,
you
yeah.
need to lock the room, please.
Very
Yeah, I'll do that.
odd. I'm not sure why
It's much
that
better.
happens, but
Yeah.
today we've got quite a bit to discuss. Everyone is, well, why don't you guys take it away and tell us what you'd like to cover?
Well, I think the most important issue is that we heard about my appeal oppression case,
Yes.
and the case has been dismissed. We're not worried about that. My attorneys are working on a plan, and we have full confidence that justice will prevail.
Mhm.
And so we're moving forward. We're putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
That's very good.
Yeah.
Certainly, it's
Now-
all that can be done.
Yeah.
Well,
And we're continuing to pray. And I have to say that when the case was dismissed, we were quite shocked. But with everybody praying out there and knowing that God is in control, it's like, it's okay. That's okay. Don't worry about it.
Well, and
He's
after
got
having-
it covered.
after having some conversation with the attorneys and talking a little bit of the strategy, although we still don't know where that's going to end up yet. They're talking again. They're having a meeting again tomorrow. As I've said in the outline, and if you don't mind bringing the outline up, Jason, we'll start going through that. We really, like Carolyn said, are more confident than ever that we're going to, when I say defeat the Dare Bully Boys, what I mean by that is we don't want to hurt them. We don't want to hurt the company necessarily. What we want to do is make sure that what Carolyn gets out of this is she has her shares sold at a fair market value and that everybody can get on with their lives. So that's really where we are today.
Yes, and I should remind everyone who's possibly joining us for the first time that the interest in this matter regarding the Dare Foods family is that Carolyn is the adopted daughter and sister of the Dare brothers, and she has been involved in this shareholder oppression case for some time, and we were all very hopeful that it would be resolved in your favor.
4 years.
4 years. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's
Well, and in
ongoing.
talking with the attorneys, and I have to be a bit careful, but when talking with the attorneys and everybody, whenever you have a case get dismissed like this, it's not over. There's still appeal opportunities with this case, even to the Supreme Court if that's where we have to go.
Right.
And we've been told very clearly, even up to now, that should we have won the case at this level or at any level, it would set a precedent. There's a lot of people out there, wealthy people in Canada, who have these same kinds of contracts and same kind of shareholder sort of holding company agreements, and that they have really been written in a way that they're oppressive. And
Right.
so one of our attorneys we talked to yesterday, who is a estate attorney, said that many of his clients are very disappointed in this decision,
Yeah.
and he felt very strongly that the decision was wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and that at both the lower court level and this appeal court level. So they're really working hard right now to get together with each other and come up with some solutions for us this week. And that's why after our discussion yesterday, we're feeling pretty confident that we're going to move through this and ultimately we will win. But uh, easy to say, you still got to do it and you've got to move forward with it.
And of
The
course,
thing that disappoints me and why we're fighting so hard with this is because there are other people in my same situation.
That's right.
And what my family and what my brothers have done and the way they've treated me is absolutely wrong. It's bullish, it's
yes.
oppressive, and it's yeah, it goes from the small little family all the way to the top of the 1%, how they treat everybody.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Well, it
it's
really is shameful. I mean, these guys are
it
your
is.
family, and they're just, I mean, they're preventing you from getting money that was rightfully willed to you by your father, right?
That's
That's right.
correct.
It's really
And frankly,
unbelievable.
even the their attorneys, and I dare say that they're no pun intended, that they've been working hard on this. And my understanding, and Carolyn was there at the appeal hearing, that they had a rough go of it at the appeal hearing. So I think even they are surprised at this
Mm.
decision. But again, we have an influence in this, and this is where we're going to go with this today. There is an influence of this at the very top that we believe is causing this prejudice,
Yeah.
which is why we're not going to quit, and why we're continuing on. One of the things I've said in this outline today is that as a backdrop to today's updated interview, what I'd like to do is present some facts and statistics regarding the current distribution of global wealth worldwide, global, and how that compares to the sort of Dare and even the Rothschild, and what we're going to call that is a codependent parallel. Now, the last time, as you recall, we had Wilfred versus the Rothschilds,
Yes.
and we gave some facts and figures in that, and I think you and I both had a discussion on that since, Jason, where we really said, all right, 500 trillion, that's a number that's on the internet that the Rothschilds are supposed to be worth. Anything on the internet, sometimes you have to take with a grain of salt. Many of the other statistics from the World Bank and so on don't show anywhere near that much, even in the total global economy.
Right.
But there's a lot of stuff hidden here. A lot of stuff hidden here. So if we were wrong on that, we stand corrected. But I don't know what we stand corrected to because the information is still out there.
Right.
Now, as I go through this outline, I'm going to point out some things, and then Jason is going to click on some of these links, and you're going to find this really interesting. And the parallels are just shocking.
Right.
They're more than interesting.
Now,
More than half of the world's
before we
population.
dig in there,
Yeah, go
Harmon,
ahead.
sorry, and there's a bit of a
Yeah,
delay to New Zealand, so we sometimes step on each other. But I just wanted to say, I spoke briefly with Charles Ortel about this, and I think he said the
great.
worldwide estimate is 50 trillion or 80 trillion, so he found the number of 500 trillion to be absurd. Harmon, there were also some people who contacted me, and I'm not saying that I feel this way, but I like to address these concerns because I don't want people
Yes.
to accuse me of bias. People said
course.
that they felt you were being anti-Semitic, which is just saying that word I'm going to get yelled at,
Oh,
in
no,
supporting
never
this
happened.
Rothschild royal. And that's what I said. I said I've come to know Harmon over the several months that we've been talking, and he is one of the kindest and most generous people I'm aware of, and I don't feel that you have any kind of anti-Jewish
No.
bias in sharing this information. I feel that you're doing your best to share firsthand testimony and evidence, and thank you, by the way, for correcting that statement, because that's what we like to do. Anytime something is said that's incorrect or a mistake, wrong, whatever, we'll go back and we'll re-examine it. We'll take in new information from legitimate, credible sources and integrate that into the process. I also want to point out that people can go to harmonwilfred.com and read all about the story that Harmon and Carolyn have been through. And of course, you can click on this little "Let There Be Light" just below the angel here, and that will take you to Harmon's Lumina Diem webpage, which details the incredible saga and also links to all the videos that we've been making. So it's a good centralized repository for people who want to follow along or perhaps coming to this information for the first time. And with that, Harmon,
right.
why don't you take us through the outline for today?
I just want to say one thing.
Sorry, yes.
One of my best girlfriends that I've grown up with since I was 12, 13 years old is Jewish, and we're still friends to this day. And we have nothing against people's belief, religion, as long as it's loving and kind. What we're trying to do is expose the corruption. No matter where it is, we're just trying to expose
religion.
the
Yeah,
corruption.
exactly.
It doesn't matter
Exactly.
what people's beliefs or religion is. It's the corruption that's within the individual, within their organizations, within whatever that we're trying to expose.
Right. And, you know,
Right,
it's
well-
very interesting to see how we are constantly pursued by people who want to press false narratives right now, even in the chat, that's happening. So I'm going to try and eliminate that. People saying I owe them money for something. I don't know this person at all, so that's absurd. But we are becoming more discerning and realizing that there's obviously a reason. I think if we were doing a cooking show about how to make Dare biscuits, probably would not meet so much resistance here. And that shows me, Harmon, that you are most definitely over the target, as they say, receiving
Yes.
flack.
That's right. That's right. They're trying to shoot me down, Jason.
Right. So let's dig into your outline for today, and people can find this outline on the Lumina Diem page.
That's right. Right at the top on the homepage. The outline was just uploaded today, a little while ago.
And it's May 1st there in New Zealand. Happy May.
It is May 1st here. Yeah, yeah. I always joke with people that if you want to know what's going on in the stock market tomorrow, just ask me. I'm
That's
already
right.
here.
Your very existence in New Zealand is a time phone hack to some extent.
That's right. That's right.
Quinn Michaels will be pleased.
There you go. Well, again,
yes.
These facts and figures show such a parallel on a global scale as to what Carolyn is going on, or what's going on with her family, that I had to point this out, and I want to bring our audience in here to sort of say we all have a similar issue going on at different levels, and I think we can all help each other. But just looking at some of the facts that you're showing there, more than half of the world's population, 3.6 billion people, live below the poverty line at $2.50 a day. And again,
Wow.
We're talking about the 1% versus the 99%, and how inequitable the whole economic system is. A new Oxfam report finds some inequality is benefiting as few as 8 billionaires, and we'll have an article to show you here in a moment on that, who already have what they're calling biblical fortunes. The top 1% has as much as 50% of the world's wealth. Now, this is an Oxfam report. Click on that, Jason, if you don't mind.
Yeah, they've been recently accused of some wacky stuff, Oxfam, haven't they? Oh, wow, look at this. Very surprising. It says the site is under maintenance.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this particular link, just 8 men. Let's see if we can find this through another method.
Oh, you're right. I just looked at it moments ago.
Very strange, Harmon.
Oh, my.
That is very strange.
That is very
All right.
strange.
All right.
Let's see if we can find it here.
There's another site that's coming up that's also an Oxfam report, but let's carry on. Anyway, in the Oxfam report, they actually talk about.
Here we go.
What's that?
Here we go. I found it.
Did you get it?
On the Cambodia.oxfam.org, I found it.
Oh, okay.
Really?
This is the article, right? Just 8 men own same wealth
That's right.
as half the world.
Yeah, that's it. That's one of the articles. Yep. But as you scroll through that, some of the facts and figures that that gives you is absolutely fascinating, and
Mm.
it makes it very clear that the world is really taken hostage by this whole issue of inequality. And again, this particular the article that we were looking at, or the one that the original one, shows 8 individual billionaires own greater than half the world's wealth, or half the population of the world's wealth. Now, if you go to
And
the
we
next
don't care
one,
what their religion is.
yeah, we don't care. The Rothschild family wealth, now again, here we go again with the Rothschild family wealth, is reported as being 5 times that of the world's top 8 billionaires combined.
Wow.
Now again, facts and figures on the internet, be careful, but you find this a lot, and as we carry on, you'll see some of the facts and figures that we've shown really begin to cause you to scratch your head and wonder whether it's true. The Rothschilds have, now here's the key: the Rothschilds have managed to keep themselves out of these statistics, frankly,
Right.
with their fabled $1 trillion net worth, and perhaps then because the World Bank statistics are controlled by the Rothschilds. I mean, what I gave you in the last interview, yeah, was the fact that the Rothschilds, and I have this all in my notes, basically have someone who they run the entire central banking system around the world, all the different countries' central banks, the monetary fund, the World Bank. They're inside those, and they're on the boards of those, and they basically run those. Now, the the human global family is being, it says, torn apart by this rapidly growing wealth inequality. And again, the proverbial rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer is absolutely true. And this is a quote out of this article. It calls for fundamental change in the way we manage our economy so that they work for all people and not just a fortunate few. Now, click on that 2017 one. Hopefully that one will come up.
Sure.
Yeah, it did. I love
Don't-
that picture.
This one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Shows the
I
8
see.
guys.
Right. Is Zuckerberg
And
in
of course,
there?
most of those are.
Wow.
Yeah,
Oh,
he
yeah.
sure is. He
So
sure is.
he's one of the 8 wealthiest in the world. I did not know that. And
That's
there's
right.
Michael Bloomberg. Now, who's this?
And,
Ben
and
Bernanke? No.
it shows the names at the bottom. It tells
Ah,
you who
yes.
the names are.
3.5 million people. Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates, Berkshire Hathaway chairman and CEO Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos, of course, right here, Larry Ellison of Oracle, former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg, Mark Zuckerberg. Oh, that's Carlos Slim. Wow, didn't realize he was in the top 8. Oh, no, wait, who's this guy? Oh, that's the head of Zara. Oh, maybe this is Ortega and this is Slim, one of these guys. Okay, so these are the top 8 wealthiest men in the world.
That's right.
That's a time phone hack. Someone's calling you from 1926.
That's right. That's right.
So please, carry on, Harmon.
Yeah, yeah. So as you look at these articles and you begin to understand the inequality, some would say that the exclusively rich have lulled the world population into a kind of economic cult. Now, Carolyn and I have talked about this, and I did some research on it, and I was fascinated to find the results. Or, as you might call, a destructive codependent relationship. We've all heard about these codependent relationships, where the codependent people who are together enable each other. Well,
Right.
the parallel here is stark. It really is. And of course, one of the members of the codependent relationship maintains their power and control that way. The basic characteristics of a financial cult-like pattern include the following: authoritarian leadership. Now, Carolyn can relate to this because she's experienced this at the Dare family level. The guy with the gold makes the rules.
From the moment I entered.
Carolyn, how old were you when you were adopted into the Dare family?
I was almost 2. I was 22 months, something like that.
So, a baby. You have no recollection of life outside the Dare family.
That's right.
No, except I do know from the history that I was in 3 foster homes before
Wow.
I was adopted.
And how was your life growing up in that family?
Um, well, I was very blessed. I mean, honestly, and my dad was an amazing man. My mother was an angel, and my brothers I played with. Not so much my older brother because he's 6 years older than I was. My younger brother I played with, and he was a bit of a, yeah, he took some of his aggression out on me, but it
Nothing
was
out of the ordinary.
no, it wasn't anything out of the ordinary. But we definitely knew who ruled. My father ruled, and he didn't have to raise his voice. Once he spanked me really badly, but I was a very naughty girl, and and yeah, all it took was a finger and a look,
But it was a
and
very, it
that's
sounds like a very normal, loving family experience. And this
Ooh.
shareholder oppression situation is maybe a little surprising to you when it started?
um. He called himself a benevolent dictator. My father did,
It did.
and as I grew up and I wasn't involved really in the dare business, and when the shareholder agreement came up, he said sign here, and I didn't have it. I was in my 20s. I didn't know that you should really hire another attorney. But even if I did know
Well,
that,
it's your
you would
father.
you would never hire another attorney. It's your father. When he says sign here, you sign here.
Of course.
So
And I mean, also, even if he wasn't your father, he's one of the most powerful businessmen in all of Canada.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
and I
and
have to say, dear, if I might interrupt, it's been my experience in watching all this from the outside that whenever if money came up,
oh,
everything changed.
yep,
When
How
you
so,
if you
Harmon?
that was the sacred cow. If you
yep,
touched the family
yep.
money in any way, shape, or form without having her father's absolute permission and
Yeah.
leeway,
Oh,
you can describe that, dear, please.
the whole environment changed when I was in my young teens. I used to get an allowance, a small, believe me, it was a small allowance. It wasn't a lot. And if I went to ask for an advance, I tell you, the sweat would drip from my armpits, just knowing that I had to go to my father and talk to him about money. Talking about money was just, it was a horrific experience. It just sent you into sort of adrenal shock, if you know what I mean. It was a frightening experience because nobody challenged. I mean, you could challenge him a little bit and get away with it a little bit, and then he would put his foot down. But nobody challenged him about his money. Nobody.
Right.
Well,
But
frankly, my experience was nobody ever challenged him about anything. You never said no to him.
Yeah.
well, he's obviously a very persuasive, and I mean, you don't rise to that level of success in business without having a strong
Right.
personality, a lot of. Someone said the lens
What was
is
Sorry,
that?
smudged. No, that's okay. But obviously, he's a
somebody
very
said my
powerful
camera was
man.
smudged.
I saw that. I don't know if that was correct or not, but that's fine. So, Carl Dare, obviously a very powerful businessman, knows
Very.
what to do and how to get what he wants. And even in this portrait of him, he looks like a man of some conviction, I must say.
That's right.
Very much so.
He was
And
never
he
wrong.
usually he usually got what he wanted,
Right.
and nobody crossed him. And they knew that in the business world, you do not cross. Well, they knew that I mean, even when Harmon was in front of the judge, you do not cross Carl Dare.
And when did he die, Carolyn?
Um, 4 years ago.
Pretty recently. And that's when your problems with the shareholder oppression situation started. Do you feel that your brothers changed in any way after the death of your father?
It started
Oh, many years ago. Yeah.
many years before that. It really started when Harmon and I became involved, and he realized that he didn't have as much control over me as he would have liked.
And so,
Yeah.
was it that they just didn't like Harmon, or it was when Harmon's legal troubles related to his whistleblowing of the CIA's wrongdoing that they became uncomfortable with him?
Pardon me, what did you just say?
Would you say that the issues with your brothers began when you and Harmon got together because they disliked Harmon, or was it linked to Harmon's legal issues relative to the CIA whistleblowing?
Oh, listen, I had issues with my brothers since the time I was a teenager, and they didn't like my first husband, and then they didn't like the partner I had after that, and they didn't approve of the way I lived my life, and especially my younger brother. My older brother was far more of a diplomat, but my younger brother, Graham. And then, of course, when I met Harmon and he was arrested, then it just escalated to beyond, yeah.
Because they didn't
But
want
it,
any
but I
sort of
really,
negative affiliation with the Dare family, the food brand,
Right.
any of that.
Image is
well,
everything.
yes, it wasn't socially acceptable. Um, yeah, it just wasn't right. But uh, I don't know. I've always questioned. I've never been close with my brothers. I've always questioned as to why. And I'm very different. I'm very different in the family from anybody else. I express myself. I talk about my emotions. Um, I'm just different, and they're very different in a very different way. They keep very quiet, don't say much, and don't talk a lot.
And of course, Dare Foods is a gigantic brand, very well known in Canada, also operating within the United States. So, this is a packaged food company, and we've discussed in the past that it does on the order of $400 million a year in business. And you've also spoken about offshore accounts and some strange things that were going on there. But I'm taking us a bit off track from Harmon's.
They have a large company. They have a large production company in North Carolina in Spartanburg.
Did not know that.
Yes.
Yeah, they're very big.
Okay.
And they also license.
All over the world.
They license their product throughout Europe, throughout Asia, and throughout Australasia.
Yeah.
So this is a major
So they
company.
truly are global.
And there's
they truly are global.
There's no real practical reason. It's not like you've gone and started a competitive company or somehow violated some sort of tenet of the business or any aspect of your father's will. This is just your brothers really, proactively trying to stop you from obtaining this money that is rightfully left to you by your father. If Carl were alive, he very probably would not approve of this, correct?
Well, he wouldn't approve of it, but also he would have done something about it long before now. He would have, come and spoken to me and talked to me about it. But they
What do you
don't
mean?
want
Talk
my
to you about
brothers
it
do
how?
not. Oh, he might have said, could we work something out, or I'll do this.
Was your father alive when you've told us in the past that they tried to coerce you with money to leave Harmon? They wanted to buy you a house and all that.
Yeah.
Your father was alive.
That was my father's and my brother's idea.
So-
Unfortunately, yes, they came up with this plan, and over the phone, my father said, "Look, if you divorce Harmon, if you divorce Harmon, come back to Canada. I will buy you a nice house and give you a small salary, and then the pièce de résistance, and you can find yourself a nice young man." And I was raised to be very polite, and I politely declined and said, "No, thank you." I didn't say, "What in heaven's name are you thinking?"
Now, let me ask you this. Your father's death, was it sudden, or, in other words, would he, do you think, have changed his will knowing that you were staying with Harmon, or how did he die?
Well, he was 96, and he did change his will. Originally, I was in the will, and my brothers were in the will. He took all of us out of the will, and he put the grandchildren in the will, of which I'm pleased. I'm pleased that the grandchildren, benefited from that. But he left shares in the company to the three of us.
Right.
And
so I guess
he couldn't.
His thought
he couldn't
process
change
was,
that.
you adult children could run the company and have an adequate income from the success of the Dare Foods brand, and the grandchildren whose lives would happen many years later, less certain what would happen with the brand, they had money that was actually his money, not necessarily related to the company. But what I'm getting at is,
That's right.
your father didn't choose to chop you out of the ownership of the company. This is your brother's doing.
That's right. Now, the interesting thing is the will that I was in before, when my brothers and I were in the will, what he did in that, and dear God, what is the man thinking, really? He put my brothers in charge of everything that I owned.
Wow.
So this or everything in the will. So in other words, whatever I got in the will, they were in charge of it. They could say whether I get this or that or how much or whatever. So this pattern has continued to this day. My brothers are in charge of the entire company, everything.
Do you
They
think your
just,
father wanted them to do what's happening right now?
I honestly can't say that. I wouldn't think that he would approve of what they're doing right now. As I said, I think he might have, before it had gotten this far, he might have come to me and said, this is crazy.
But
But
he was quite clear that he
I
didn't
can't say
want you
that.
to continue your life with Harmon. It's
That's
difficult.
very
Yes.
true. That's very true.
Yes.
That's
That's
very
I'll give you
sad.
one. I'll give you one instance, just quickly, that I think not only was I an embarrassment to them because I'd been put in these different prisons and so on and got out, and of course it was all the CIA stuff, but I walked in his office one day when Carolyn was sitting there talking with him, and she was in tears, and he had a
So
list in front of him.
let me just fill this in. He called me into his office 3 times, once with my youngest daughter, once by myself, and once with Harmon. He had a list that he said he put together with the boys, 3 pages long, of everything that I had done wrong in my life. And he was going to go over this list with me to, I don't know what he hoped to accomplish,
Wow.
but it was very emotionally cruel. It was
It was
very
awful
emotionally
stuff,
cruel.
just awful
Yeah.
stuff. I wouldn't even begin to tell you some of the things that were on that list.
Wow. That is
But
strange.
Harmon made a comment.
Yeah, I walked into the office when this was going on, and I saw her in tears, and I sat and I listened to him for a couple of minutes, and I stopped him. And I mean, we're talking the big Dare corporate office, giant desk. Imagine
And
how
you're
intimidating that
challenging
would be
him.
to. Oh yeah,
Oh
and I
yeah.
stopped him, and I said, Carl, you you have to know, being in the position that you're in and the age that you are and the wisdom that you have, that this is not the way to motivate anybody, let alone your daughter. And you can see that she's very upset. And as I began to talk to him, he stopped me and he said, "Don't you lecture me."
Wow.
And I said, "All right, then obviously, if you don't want to be lectured, I'm going to assume that you know what you're doing is wrong. But either way, you will never," and I mean, I pointed my finger at him, "you will never talk to my wife this way ever again. Ever. You will respect her in my presence and otherwise. And if I find out otherwise, we're going to have another talk like this. You get out of my office." So we left. And that was, I mean, you can imagine how he felt about me after that.
He hated
Well,
you.
he
This
he he
this
he.
man was in control. He had to control everything. He was the god of the Dare family, and in many cases, he thought he was God. I'm telling you,
Yeah.
he
Wow.
was as narcissistic as they come. If
Wow.
you were nice to him and you did everything he told you to do,
Yeah.
and you followed all his rules, then he was nice to you. If you broke any of his rules, I mean, let me just go through these things that I was on a moment ago. Authoritarian leadership. This is about an economic cult. Talk about worshiping money. The authoritarian leadership says the guy with the gold makes the rules. He made the rules. Exclusivism, requiring social and economic mores and boundaries. You step outside any of his rules or any of his boundaries, like she did when she met me, and we ended up having to get married without him because he wasn't going to approve
Yeah,
of it.
we didn't invite
You
them.
step outside of that,
That's
your
terrible.
life is going to be a living hell. Opposition to independent thinking. Uh, Carolyn was never allowed to think on her own. Anything that she did or suggested that was of her own thoughts, they made her feel like she was stupid.
Yeah.
And fear
And
of this.
being, oh sorry, and being a female in a traditional German family, well, those who know traditional German families, old school German families, you were kept in your place, and you weren't thought of to be very smart.
Now, I'm not sure that I knew that the Dare family heritage was German. When did they
Yes.
come to Canada from Germany?
Oh, a long time ago, but I think it was my great great grandfather who came to Canada. But the Dare name originally was spelt Doerr with an umlaut over the O. And because nobody knew how to pronounce it or spell it, um, when he married my mother,
Her
he
father, yeah.
yeah, when my father married my mother, he changed the name to Dare because it was Doerr, which is a German name.
Hmm.
And Carl, of course, is German.
Right. And well, we've been speaking with Scott Bennett about the Union Bank of Switzerland. And of course, that brought me to some knowledge that I had of Prescott Bush laundering Nazi money through the Union Bank of Switzerland. And it's interesting how the Bush family is of German heritage and is so powerful in the United States.
Yeah.
Not to, I mean, what's the history of the Dare family in Germany relative to the Nazi Party? Anything?
I have no idea,
Yeah.
but the city that I'm from, Kitchener, Ontario,
Mm-hmm.
its original name was Little Berlin,
Wow.
and because of the war, because of the
Because of
Nazi
World War
war,
II, yeah.
yeah, they changed the name to
Ooh.
Kitchener after General Kitchener, or Major Kitchener, whatever.
This is good information for us to discuss because I think what will happen is even in these cases where there's questions that you might not have the answers to, Carolyn, there are a lot of people in the crowdsourced community who are experts in genealogy
Yeah.
and will go and study this history, and perhaps we will learn some things about the family history that may
Yeah.
not be known. And the hope would be that learning those things will help us answer some of these unanswered questions as to why. I mean, your brothers obviously have enough money that they don't need to keep this money from you. They're doing it sort of punitively
Yeah.
to prevent you from being empowered by the money to enter into the lawsuits and the legal defenses that would be necessary for you to get the travel documents needed to go to New Zealand to be reunited with your
Yes.
husband. It really is
Yes.
staggering cruelty. I mean, I can understand families not necessarily liking someone that you marry, but to not basically just get over it and acknowledge that you're
There's
a grown
more.
woman. Yeah, there's,
There's
And it's and
more,
it's
believe
and it's
me.
not as though they cannot buy her out. In fact, Carl Dare was rather extraordinary in the way that he did business. And you've never I've never heard of this before. At the size that he is, you know, $300-400 million a year in sales and so on, with a company that's worth $200-300 million, probably more than that. We still don't know how much it's worth.
mhm.
But when you think about that sort of thing, and you begin to look at the fact that Carl Dare and Dare Foods has never had outside debt. If you look at their financial statements, they only have internal debt from one company. They have never borrowed money from it. Well, they hadn't until the boys took over. They had a small loan. Now I think they paid it back. But he's never borrowed money. He built that company up without any debt. And
None.
Amazing.
today, the company has no debt. It's got assets, book value assets, somewhere in the range of 200 million, and that's some of the book value of real estate
Oh, it's ridiculous.
locations that have been there for as much as 30 years, and of course you know that real estate always appreciates. It doesn't depreciate it, so they've got the depreciated book value of all this stuff, and they just refuse to give Carolyn any realistic number of what the company's really worth. But either
We've
way,
asked for
they
evaluation, and they've constantly refused.
How is
they've
that
got
legal if you're a shareholder?
well, because it's a private company.
And
If
they
it was a
control
public
it.
company, it wouldn't be legal.
Yeah.
But
Ah.
as a private company, they seem to be able to get away with everything. And of course, because it's oppressive, now here we go, because it's oppressive, you should be able to go into the Canadian system, because the Canadian system is the hardest in the world on people, on companies that are oppressive. As a minority shareholder, Canada is brutal. That's why we're all in so much shock over the
Yeah.
first level court, now the appeal level court. They've come back and said, well,
Yeah.
all your arguments, here's your arguments, 1, 2, 3, 4. She hasn't been given uh, uh, dividends. Dividends, money from the company has been diverted to another company so the boys could pay themselves and she wouldn't get paid. The things that they have done, and the shareholder agreement itself is written in a way that it's oppressive. The appeal court basically said, well, number one, we don't agree. Number two, we don't agree. Number three, we don't agree. Number four, we don't agree. Dismissed.
No explanation. So the
It's
big question mark.
absolutely shocking.
The big question mark is, who interfered? Because
right.
it never should have happened. Who interfered?
And it fits the pattern of everything that's happened, where
Everything.
Harmon is being
Everything.
arrested without charges and thrown in prison.
Oh, God.
And we've seen Michael Horowitz say there's nothing to investigate here. Now, again, just not to be all over the place, although I apologize that I am, back on the issue of Michael Horowitz, this came up, and I forgot to ask Scott Bennett about this. When I was watching some of his material, Scott Bennett is a former member of the U.S. Army, and he's a counterintelligence expert, and he has written a book called Shell Game. He also was wrongly imprisoned for 4 years. And he, I believe, mentioned that Michael Horowitz had some kind of tie to UBS, which was a possible conflict of interest. And I'm looking forward to having Scott back on so we can dig into that a bit more. But it's, again, I mean, this is one of the primary functions of Crowdsource the Truth, is that now we know you guys, we know Scott. Hopefully there'll be a time in the near future where we can bring these stories together, share some of the information, compare notes, if you will, and hopefully each of us can learn something more. But let's get back, Harmon, to your outline here, if we could.
Well, this is good, because I didn't want to be so structured with this one. You're helpful in that,
Good.
Jason.
I try.
What we're trying to say here is that what we've got here, globally as well as with Carolyn's situation, is an economic cult. And the economic cult, the characteristics of that, and I did a lot of research on this: authoritarian leadership, and just quickly, exclusivism, requiring social and economic mores and boundaries, opposition to any independent thinking, which Carolyn can relate to at her level very easily, and fear of disapproval and threats of isolation or actual punishment. Now, when you think about that on a global level, and you think about things like social media and likes and dislikes and Facebook and the bullying that goes on there, you can begin to relate to it on a global level as well as Carolyn.
Absolutely.
But, I mean, as I've said in the next paragraph, these are easily applied to a single wealthy family or to the entire global system. We, the people of this world, literally are stuck in a codependent relationship where, because we don't get together, because we can't come together as one, and now with social media, that's the good news and the bad news. The good news is we can come together as one. We can stand up to this. But right now, Carolyn and I are standing up to her brothers and her family in the same way that we believe we, the people, should be standing up to this global economic nightmare, this codependent relationship that we've got with all these wealthy people, with the 1%.
Right.
In my testimony in the oppression case, I kept saying the control is outrageous. Yeah. It's just it's off the charts. It's like, I'm 66 years old and I'm still being controlled by my family. I'm not, 8.
Or 15.
I was in my 50s when they said, "Gee, you need to divorce Harmon and come back to Canada. We'll give you some money."
Oh, that's so absurd.
And you can find a nice young man.
Name, and find yourself a nice young man. I have found my man, and I'm sticking with him, and I don't care what they say or what they do.
I'm so proud of both of you for that, because I think a lot of people watching know how difficult marriage can be without the incredible superhuman stress that you two have been through. And certainly, I think being in a marriage where one or more of a person's family members don't necessarily like the choice that's a fairly common thing, and it's very sad when that happens. Marriage, in the best circumstances, is a difficult compromise throughout life, and anything like that that adds to that pressure is always unfortunate.
Hmm.
What I'd like to do, because we don't want to just go through and read all this stuff, there's just
Yes.
too much of it. You're on page 2. Go to the bottom of page 2 and just have a look at number 10, 11, and 12.
Sure.
This whole issue here is what's the, I mean, if you have to ask yourself the question when you look at the title of this particular interview, what in the world is the connection between the Clintons and Dare Foods of Canada? My
Yes.
goodness,
Excellent
is
question.
that a stretch or what?
And the
Yeah.
Rothschild, yeah.
And the Rothschilds. Well, interestingly enough, if you look at all the things we've been through and how the Dare family have followed this and continue to support the narrative that's against us
Yes.
by trying to keep her from getting a penny of her inheritance, or at least of the shares and so on from the company and from her shares.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I've said in number 10 is, if she were to win, now keep in mind, you're talking about the Clintons, you're talking about the CIA, and you're also talking about the Rothschilds, who are part of that cartel now, because the Rothschilds stepped in and they're the ones who assisted in making sure that these Mitsubishi notes were being done. So you've got billions of dollars available to them now in this covert bank that the Clintons and the Rothschilds and the CIA do not want to see exposed.
Right.
If she should win this case at any level, now she got dismissed at this level, she can go to another level. There's other things that we can do that we're now talking to the attorneys about, and frankly, quite effective things. If she should win this and actually receive the money that she should be getting, nothing more, nothing less, we're talking about fair market value of her shares, and that's tens of millions of dollars. She could easily pay her tax. She could continue with the UN human rights case against Canada and completely expose the Clinton CIA crime syndicate. And of course, that also exposes the Rothschilds, God willing. This, as well as suing New Zealand for multiple human rights violations, is outlined in that March 12th interview outline.
Right.
It's no wonder that the government of Canada doesn't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to be taken back to the human rights court. Clinton and the CIA don't want to have their dosh exposed. I mean, what they've done is so illegal and so criminal and so it's hard to put a word on it. That once they're exposed, they're screwed.
Deplorable.
Yeah.
Deplorable.
Deplorable is a good word. Somebody came up with that a while back. Who was that?
Who was that?
Yeah. But what I've said here in number 11, neither the Clinton/CIA and now/Rothschild cartel nor the Canadian government can ever allow Carolyn to win her oppression case or receive funds for her shares for fear of being completely exposed.
Wow, that's
So
daunting.
what's the connection? And they're using the Dares now, wittingly or unwittingly, as the bully boys that they needed to use them for, to keep her from getting her money. I mean, if you recall, in 2009, in one of our previous interviews, along came the CRA when we had the case in the UN going pretty strongly, and I just filed for a judicial review, and we had them locked in. They basically froze the CRA. The Canadian government had the CRA freeze all of Carolyn's assets. They've been frozen ever since. So she
And
could
they
no
didn't
longer
freeze
fund.
and they didn't freeze anybody else's assets.
No.
Just mine.
No, yeah. So she could no longer fund the case. So they're doing everything they can to keep her from getting any money so that we can't expose them. Well, hello guys. How about the truth? We're bringing out the truth. This isn't costing us anything. Thank God for you, Jason.
Yes.
So is it really true that the truth could set us free? I think it is. It may be that they've gone the wrong direction. They're trying to keep her from getting any money, but the truth will set us free, and the truth ultimately will get her money because she's supposed to have it. It's hers. Her father gave it to her. These shares, she should be able to sell them.
The other
But
issue. As to
Carolyn's brothers and Dare Foods, whether they are, as I said a moment ago, deliberately or unwittingly involved in this conspiracy, they still stand to win by forcing Carolyn out of our marriage, and they've been pretty successful at that, along with all the government's help, and maintaining complete control over her and the entire family fortune. Being bullies also comes naturally for the Dare Bully Boys in this family financial cult. It's a cult, folks. Go ahead, dear.
I just wanted to say with the CRA freezing my shares. Well, we mentioned before, and I'll just go over it quickly, that we were forced to leave Canada because of Harmon's situation. We couldn't
That's
stay.
right.
We couldn't stay in the country because our lives were in danger. And in that leaving Canada, there was the CRA then decided that I should have a departure tax on my shares.
Which is out of the ordinary, right?
Well, keep in mind, if we weren't forced to depart, there would have been no departure tax. So the
That's right.
government caused this in the first place. We then came up with a creative way of not having to pay the tax. There was a really good offshore attorney who said, "Well, wait a minute, I think I can fix this." And then they came along, and they retroactively changed the law, and they removed the opportunity to use that particular tax approach, and they came back and they billed her for the whole darn thing. So it didn't work. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised if all these other people in Canada who were using this offshore approach also got screwed out of that. And it was all because we used it and they came along and nailed her. Therefore, they had to nail everybody with her. That wouldn't surprise me at all.
We've also spoken in the past about offshore tax havens being used by a trust
Right.
that the Dare family has. Now, obviously, if that's illegal and the government knows about it, that would be a tremendous lever to use against the brothers to coerce them into doing something like this. And
Yeah.
we've definitely seen the far-reaching, the tentacles of this thing going as far as our not-so-good friend, Mr. Southers here, who, as what was he? He was the chairman of the pension fund when you first encountered him, Harmon?
No. Southers was the district attorney. He was the district attorney. I mean, he was literally the head of the district attorney's office. His friend was the administrator for the pension fund.
Right.
And he was covering for his friend while his friend was stealing the pension fund blind.
And it's interesting to see how this persecution has progressed, because it starts down low with people doing kind of low-level things. They throw you in jail. Not to diminish this, I'm sure it was horrible for you and could have easily resulted in your death, which may in fact have been their intention. But you don't need to get loads and loads of people or lots of government agencies involved to stick you in a prison for 4 months. They sort of did that and hoped you would shut up and go away.
Well, and then they turned me over to John Southers, hoping he would make me go away, but that didn't work either.
Right. And obviously he has risen in power since you initially became aware of him. So there's people who are sort of on the side of this, and then there's you and Carolyn who are fighting this, and now myself and the members of the crowdsourced community. Incidentally, now that the case has been dismissed, is there any way that people in the crowdsourced community can help in this fight?
We are discussing options with our attorneys. I don't believe that's one of the options, but we will discuss it and see what they come up with, and we'll let you know.
We'll put it this way. We've had some pretty creative discussions in the last 24 hours.
And there's
48
definitely
hours.
a growing number of people who are aware of your story, and you really have to be an evil person to not be touched by this. A family that's been destroyed, basically. And I mean, the amazing evidence that you've been presenting, Harmon, I think is really, it's a unique matter that I'm not sure we've really seen anything quite like it before, but I keep taking you off of the outline here. I apologize.
Well, that's all right. That's all right. I mean, one of the things we talked about is however far we get today, we'll continue next week. We'll serialize this thing until we get through it, because all of it needs to be discussed.
I don't know, honey, if when I stepped away for a minute, you mentioned about the CRA and the fact that with the departure tax, the fact that my shares were valued at that time in 2001 at $40 million. They charged me tax on half of that, and I had received nothing. They charged me tax on money that I didn't even get. I mean,
wow.
Which is stupid.
And that goes on today. I mean, this so-called it's probably close to $9 million right now in tax that they have put against her. She obviously has to sell her shares to be able to pay the tax.
Yeah.
But she was taxed before she even sold the shares. She didn't even have any money out of it to pay the tax. And now what? Now the boys are trying to keep her from being able to sell the shares.
Oh, they've been
so
doing
how
that
in the world
for
is she going to pay tax on shares that haven't been sold that at this
It
point in
can't be
time,
sold.
we don't even know the value of. I mean, this whole thing is just ludicrous.
Well, and it
Yeah.
obviously sounds like it's outside the realm of normal legal process in Canada, right?
The absurd thing about it is I've been trying to sell my shares for what, honey, 5 years now?
Yeah, yeah, that's
Five
right.
years. 5 years. My brothers have constantly, stopped me
Obstructed
from,
it.
obstructed it, stopped me from doing that. And in the meantime, the tax that I supposedly owe on money I never got has been increased at $1,000 a day interest.
What?
What is fair? Yes. What
So
is
what's
More
the
than
fair
number
more
about
than
now?
a
A
thousand
that?
dollars.
thousand
What
dollars
is
a day.
Organizations.
That's right.
What's
That's
the
right.
amount at now?
And so the amount
Well,
is at like almost $9 million. It's
that's
just
right.
the most absurd thing I've ever heard that governments
Who
can do
is
this, that
who
people
is
can do this.
listening in Canada? I mean, Harmon, I have to tell you, there are people that have emailed me saying, "Hey, this story sounds a bit fantastic. Are we sure this guy is for real, etc." And the thing is, you're laying out circumstances that should be on record right now in Canada.
They are on
How did
record.
this
They
occur?
are on record.
So, who is watching in Canada? Who is listening of authority in Canada that is aware that this is going on and continues to do nothing? How can this be allowed to happen in a legitimate country? How can a government and the power of a government and the authority of law enforcement be brought to bear on two people outside the context of the law and the rights that people are granted in the United States, in Canada, in New Zealand? How can this be allowed to continue to happen? Who is listening? Who will stop this? It's
The
amazing.
power of money, whether it's the Rothschilds or the Dares, has usurped the system. Literally usurped the system. The government, the politics, the justice system, even the law enforcement system.
Now,
And one would ask, what in the heck have I done that much political capital is being spent to do the kind of things that they're doing to me and my wife and my family, take my children, when I have literally done nothing wrong? If you look into my background and you see the things that they've tried to put against me and you see the things that they've done, I have absolutely no criminal convictions and I have done nothing wrong. You have to ask yourself the question, why is this happening? And the answer to that turns the whole thing inside out and upside down.
yeah.
But nobody is helping us fight this to find out why it's happening. If you want to win against this kind of wealth and this kind of economic advantage, you've got to stand up to it and you've got to hit them where it hurts.
And you have to expose it.
Expose it and hit them where it hurts, which is what we're discussing with the attorneys at this point in time. And well, we've got several ways of approaching it, but believe me when I say our confidence level is very high right now on how to deal with this. And
Now,
once we've dealt with it on the dare
something else,
level,
Harmon. Let me ask you something else. You were also a member of the U.S. Air Force with an honorable
That's right.
discharge. You did your
That's
duty
right.
service to this country. You've
during
never
the
committed
Vietnam
a
era
crime.
too, by the way.
Right. Now, we see all over the place other members of the U.S. Air Force, not all over the place, maybe just in Mount Shasta, who seem to be engaged in criminal activity and nothing is happening to them. And they seem to be engaged in areas of the world where you have evidence to indicate that some of the coupons from some of these bearer bonds that you're talking about may have been inappropriately used. So I find these coincidences, you're always talking about coincidence versus preponderance of evidence. I
Right.
find it terrible. And I get accused of maligning members of the military, which is absolutely not the case. I respect individuals like yourself who have served in the military honorably. Family members of mine have done that. But I reject the notion that simply being a military veteran absolves you from any wrongdoing or automatically brings respect and accolades to you. You need to be a decent human being in order to receive that. And,
Well, and as a member of the military, I had a top secret security clearance. I worked in areas that were absolutely top secret, nuclear weapons and so on. When I got out, I was always faithful to my country, and when I was asked to help the CIA, I jumped right in there and started helping. But when I found the corruption and I brought it out, here we go.
That's when your life
That's
changed.
Now,
That's right.
Jason, I have a suggestion because I know our hour is almost up, but
It is up, yeah.
in encouraging people to help get this story out, you might want to go to the email that we sent you about Fred.
Oh,
That's right.
yes. Thank you
This
for
was fun. It was a
reminding
fun
me
thing.
about that. Let me
And
bring that.
and if people really want to help in getting the truth out and real, because we're not just standing up for, I will say this, honest to God, we are not just standing up for ourselves. We are trying to make a difference where it changes a lot, a lot.
I mean,
So
I'm here to change the whole economic system. I'm here to expose it all. We all need some help. The 99% need to finally stand up and say enough. And once we've completed this and we've got the money behind it, and I'm going to say this in front of God and all these people, we will create an organization that will continue this fight. We'll continue to work with people like Jason, and we'll continue this fight. And we'll work on behalf of the 99%. We'll work on behalf of the global population and the global people to make sure that the economic systems of the world are normalized finally.
for
Yes.
those
And
who are our age and remember the program Counter Strike, think about that.
that was a television program?
Oh yeah, it
Yeah,
was an
yeah.
amazing television program.
Where a billionaire had hired a team and he went out and wherever there was injustice or anything like
Yeah,
that,
he fought
he made it
injustice.
right. And I thought to myself, wow. And that was, by the way, Christopher Plummer. You know who he
Yeah,
is.
Canadian Christopher Plummer.
You know, another
Yeah.
very important aspect of this, Harmon and Carolyn, that people I think really need to take to heart is that, again, whatever you might think about a particular story about Harmon's interaction with a Rothschild family member or a particular statement he may have made or whatever, it's documented that you've been in prison. We've seen letters about it. We've
Yes.
seen correspondence with Michael Horowitz, with John Suthers, people who are still alive and involved in government. And I think that anyone watching needs to be extremely concerned when something like
Yes.
this happens. It shows us that the Constitution is being trampled and that the rights to fair trials and the rights to not being wrongly accused and not being able to face your accusers, etc. This is extremely important, and we see it happening again now. I want to definitely let people know that when I'm addressing things that are happening, it's not me whining or me complaining. There is an individual out there who is actively attempting to gin up a terrorism charge against me for an incident
Wow.
that he was involved in staging. And I am accumulating evidence to show that. But of course, it's a great concern when we know that you, Harmon, or Scott Bennett can go into a court, and that court, as it turns out, in your case, in Scott Bennett's case, is actually a stage play and not what
That's all
we
it
all
is.
expect.
That's all it is.
I mean, Jason,
you mentioned
we spent over $400,000, and Harmon never made it into a courtroom in the United States.
and that was when I was fighting for my kids.
That is
Yeah.
very scary news that people need to.
$400,000 and 13 attorneys.
Yes.
13 attorneys.
Unlucky
And
for
they
some.
all
Jason,
have away.
let me also remind everyone, and I've said this before, anybody who doubts my story, if they will look into the website or contact me and ask me for whatever evidence they're looking for whatever I've said, I've got hard evidence. I've got notebooks. I've got emails. I've got faxes. I've got court documents. This is what I've been trying to get in front of Donald Trump, of President Trump. In fact, you're about to talk about Fred Neinstedt. Fred
Yes.
Neinstedt apparently went to the
Let
Michigan
Jason talk about it. Yeah.
the Michigan rally, and he
Yes.
took some cards. Well, he'll talk about it, but he took some
Yes,
business
yes.
cards with
Let me
promotion
pause you for a
for,
second, Harmon. Hold on,
Yeah,
because
go ahead, go ahead.
I wanted to show your website for people to go to, but we definitely want to thank Fred, member of the crowdsource community, who
Yes.
is proactively taking this effort to the streets, and not in any kind of violent or illegal way.
No.
We never want anyone to do
No.
that. But
No.
Fred is exercising his rights as a citizen of the United States, speaking out against government corruption, going to a rally. Where was this, in Michigan?
Michigan. That's right,
Mm-hmm.
the
Okay.
Trump rally.
He's going to the Trump rally. He's meeting with people who maybe are unaware of this situation to raise awareness. He was handing out business cards, and I want to thank Fred personally.
Look at him. There's Trump in the background. Can you see him?
Oh yes, there he is, right up there.
He handed out cards that have, well, if you read it, Jason, he'll tell you. He handed out cards that had Harmon's website on it. It had your crowdsource the truth on it. It had contact details on it. He also handed out Harmon's letter to Donald Trump. He met with congressmen. He met with Fox News. He also discussed this with Laura Trump. So
Amazing.
if people
And she took the documents in the letter. So God bless this guy. He's really out there pumping his heart.
He's amazing.
Absolutely.
So if anybody else feels the unction, feels it in their heart that they can do this as well, please get this word out. We need to make a difference.
Yes.
And thank you, Donald Trump and President Trump and Laura Trump, for considering this. Please take it seriously.
And Fox News, and God bless you. God bless you, Fred.
Yes, thank you very much. Fred is definitely taking the crowdsource the truth mantra to heart. And I'm frequently asking people, how can we help with this or that? And Fred and other people out there are being creative and exercising their rights and coming up with ways that they can help. And it really is an incredibly powerful thing to be able to do.
Can I just say one thing?
Please.
He says something about shout it out, and I don't understand that technology term. But if people can also take our Twitter, I put it on each video, our Twitter Harmon tweets, hashtag America's First Refugee, hashtag get them all fired, and send it out. Let's just tell the world. Let's just make this thing go viral.
Yes.
So that we can make a difference. You're making a difference. We can stand up against this corruption and against these bullies and against the 1% and make a difference.
Yeah.
Doing nothing is enabling this thing at every level.
Yes.
And if you want to do something, we've got to do it together. You're never going to defeat this kind of evil without coming together. So let's crowdsource it.
Yes.
Let's get out there and go viral. Let's get on the social media and let's talk about this thing more, and let's share this stuff. Help Carolyn and I defeat her bullies, and then we'll go out and help the world defeat their bullies. Believe me, we will.
And these are the same bullies who would pose a threat to anyone that gets in their way. So I do believe that the election of Donald Trump as president and the things that we've been seeing evolving over the past 18 months while he's been in office mark essentially a line in the sand for these types of criminals who would defy our constitutional rights and simply what is right. You cannot carry on with this level of criminal corruption without there being a reckoning. And what people can do is they can follow Harmon on Twitter. He is at Harmon Tweets. And we should really, let's get the followers up there. We should have thousands of people following Harmon. You should think, how would you feel if the government intervened to separate you from your family and to illegally lock up all of your financial assets and essentially attempt to suffocate you in the most insane and oppressive way I can possibly imagine, including physical torture, being put in jail, mental torture, being separated from your wife, your children. This is one of the most horrible stories that I have ever been made aware of, and every one of us, I don't believe there's necessarily some gigantic thing to be done. We're like drops of water, and the ocean can be broken down into individual drops of water. The Grand Canyon, of course, we're told, is made by a trickling stream. So when we come together in that way and everyone tweets, find the video in the series America's First Refugee that you think is the most powerful or the most important. And when you share a video on YouTube, if you go down below the video to the share icon, click on that little box that lets you start it at the precise moment where you think the most important thing is said, and share that link. So the second the recipient plays it, it gives a quote from Harmon or Carolyn or myself or whoever the guest might be that gets right to the point. And send that to Donald Trump or whoever you think needs to see it. Yes, Carolyn?
I have one quote. As
Please.
Edmund Burke had said much more than 100 years ago, and the Americans know who Edmund Burke is, the quote, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil was that good men should do nothing."
Exactly.
And that hit me right between the eyes when I read that. So, all of you good men and women out there, do something.
Yeah, join us. I mean, stand with us, and we'll stand with you. You know, if you've had enough of this economic oppression, which Carolyn, of course, is fighting her oppression case in the Canadian courts, let us help fight the total oppression case that's going on worldwide. The economic oppression and the inequalities are absolutely stupid. One of the reasons why I think the Wall Street movement and the 99 and the 1% movement didn't go anywhere is because there was really no leadership. Hello, I'm ready to pick up the ball, and I'd love to lead. I'd love to lead the charge on this thing if you'll have me. And if you don't want me, then we'll all collectively find someone who will lead it. But let's begin to put an arrowhead on the point of this thing, and let's fire that arrow. Let's get this thing done.
Well said, Harmon. And, you know, pardon me if this is a bit silly, but there seems to be some poetic irony in Carolyn selecting that quote from Edmund Burke, because before I even knew you guys, this is one Goodman who decided I can no longer do nothing. And that is why I created Crowdsource the Truth, so that we could all
Hallelujah.
come together and have a platform. Now, we are pushing an hour and 10
Yeah, we
minutes
are.
here, so
Yeah.
is there something that you guys would like to close with, and then we can pick up next week?
No, and
I
just
think
that there's a lot more.
Yeah, there's much more to come. This is only part even of this particular outline. We'll be back next week with much more news. There's a lot happening this week in Carolyn's case and what the attorneys are doing.
We hope.
So yeah, I have no doubt it is. So yeah, there you go. So we'll see you all next week, and we'll give you an update then. But everything is accelerating, and it's all good. Believe me,
Yep.
it's all good.
Thank you both so much for joining me in this international teleconference that we've been doing every week. I want to thank everyone for watching, and I want to remind everyone that it's important that you become a sponsor of Crowdsource the Truth so we can continue to bring stories like that of Harmon and Carolyn Wilfred to you, and that we can expose this type of criminality. I want to thank everyone for watching, and I will see you tomorrow.
God bless.
Great.